Good morning, and I call this special work session of the Washington City Council to order. All right, I guess we'll turn it over to Allison for a presentation. Yeah.
Good morning. I'm Mary Beth Houston. I am the NCDOT Division 2 engineer. And for those that are not familiar with DOT, we have 14 divisions. Division 2 covers 8 counties, all the way from Carteret to Beaufort, Pamlico to Greene, Lenoir, Jones, Pitt counties. And so we are glad to come today. I know there's been a lot of changes on the council, so we're happy to come today and talk to you about the 15th Street project. We've been working with the city on this since 2023. And so I'm going to let my team introduce themselves.
Good morning. I'm Cadmus Capar. I'm the Deputy Division Engineer for Division 2. Thank y'all for having us.
And I'm Heather Lane. I'm the Division 2 Project Development Engineer.
And we also have with DOT Michael Amon with our project development. He's one of our project development engineers. And Catherine Hossigmeyer, she's also with our project development unit. And we have Sam Singleton in the room. He is with the, he's the transportation planner with the Mideast RPA. And so I'm going to turn it over to our project manager is Allison Thorburn. And Allison is due to have a child any day now, so she wished she could be here, but she just did not venture far from home.
Yes. Can y'all hear me all right? Yes. Awesome. Thank you, Mary Beth. Yeah, I wish I could be there. I think my husband would kill me if I leave more than 10 minutes from our house right now. So expecting a child any day, but excited that I can still be a part of this workshop. So thank you for having us. I'm going to go ahead and dive into the presentation if we're ready. We're here to walk through the 15th Street project. And it's a corridor we all know that plays a major role in how people move through Washington. One that's been, a priority for the community and also for NCDOT's Division 2. So the presentation, although it'll be virtual, our team is in person. They're fully prepared to guide you through the maps we have provided, which is our latest design. And so we're looking forward to doing that. So we kind of already did this. We're going to kind of open with an opening statement. We've kind of done some of our introductions on the DOT end. I will then walk us through a presentation, and then we will have a group question and answer session. So Mary Beth, kind of turning it back over to you. I know you kind of opened this up, but anything you wanted to add?
No, Allison, you can go ahead.
Okay. Awesome. And I didn't know if the council, if folks from the city, did y'all want to go ahead and do quick introductions? I know we know most of y'all, but just so we have a record of who's in the room.
Sure. Yeah, Mayor Ellen Brabo.
Nick Fritz, Mayor Pro Tem. Good morning, everybody.
Councilmember Max Peralt.
Councilmember Anthony Tyree.
Joe Davis, and congrats on your baby too.
Thank you. Okay, so let's go ahead and just dive in then. So the 15th Street project is also known as STIP Project U5860 since it's included in our State Transportation Improvement Program, or our STIP. It was restarted following approval at a Washington City Council work session back in January 2023. At that meeting, City Council had stated its support for the project. They had acknowledged that a median is part of the proposal. And then they also requested enhanced pedestrian accommodations at that time, including a sidewalk and a multi-use path. NCDOT agreed to incorporate those elements at that time. And that direction allowed us to restart preliminary engineering, which had originally begun back in 2014. Also following the council's approval at that work session, the city entered into a utility preliminary engineering agreement, or a UPEA, and that formally initiated utility relocation plan development as a part of this project as well. Diving into some existing conditions along the corridor, this slide shows the traffic study results for the 15th Street corridor, which is our study area is from US 17 business to US 264. The findings were that the base year average annual daily traffic, or AADT, is about 21,100 vehicles per day, or VPD. And that's projected to increase to 23,700 vehicles per day by 2050. And that's about a 12% growth over 27 years. That type of growth we would indicate as steady and gradual, kind of reflecting regional growth that we would expect to see for a municipality of your size, rather than an indicator of any type of excessive growth or new major traffic generators. In the study, I wanted to highlight that the highest traffic volumes occur between Washington Plaza, their driveway, and the driveway from Midtown Crossing. And currently in the base year, which is 2023, we would see 22,100 vehicles per day. And so this forecast is kind of one of the tools that helps guide our design decisions. And it kind of confirms that this corridor has served and will continue to serve local access, but also be a key east-west connector. So I wanted to dive in a little bit into our methodology for developing a traffic forecast. It's pretty standard across the department for all state-funded projects. For the base year, the team relied on on-site traffic counts, historic trends of average annual daily traffic, and then a field review to establish an accurate picture of current conditions. For the future year, which we're looking at 2050, the forecast incorporates two regional travel demand models, one that is specific to Washington, and then one that is statewide, along with historic growth patterns, engineering, judgment, and these give us inputs for a realistic projection of how traffic is expected to evolve over those 25 plus or minus so years. One important note, this project is not expected to induce additional traffic with its implementation. The future volumes kind of reflect that background regional growth we're expecting and not project-driven demand. More existing conditions. This slide summarizes key crash data collected by NCDOT along the 15th Street corridor. Over the 5-year study period, there were 417 crashes, averaging 83.4 crashes per year, or just over 1.5 per week. And if you click, Heather, I'll go ahead and circle that data so you can see where I'm getting that. Click one more and there should be a box. Yep. And then if you click again, we'll see that the corridor exceeds the statewide and critical crash rates in 4 out of the 5 major categories. There we go, and click again. Perfect, one more time. Perfect, so those are the 4 out of 5 major categories that we are exceeding: total, fatal, non-fatal injury, and wet. And these exceedances are shown in red and highlight a corridor-wide safety deficiency. If you click again, we will see that the fatal crash rate is more than quadruple the statewide rate for similar facilities. And then moving on to the second table, which I thought was helpful, this quantifies how much improvement would be possible if the corridor is upgraded to a 4-lane divided facility, which is our proposal. By comparing current crash rates to the statewide norms for the proposed facility type, we can approximate a 57% reduction in total crashes and a 76% reduction in fatal crashes. Moving forward, the most common crash types are left turn, rear end, side swipe, and angle crashes. If you click again, Heather, we can kind of circle that these left turn crashes make up nearly 1/3 of all incidents, which I think is important. That kind of pattern usually points to reoccurring turning conflicts, congestion, and lane change friction along the corridor. If you click again, Heather, we'll kind of highlight that nearly 30% of all crashes result in some type of injury, which is unusually high for a corridor of this type, and signals significant conflict points along the corridor. If you click again, the remaining 70%, you'll see our property damage only crashes, a pattern which is typically associated with sudden braking, traffic queuing, and operational inefficiencies. Lastly, if you click again, we'll see that 14% of the crashes occur in wet conditions and 12% of the crashes occur at night. And this usually suggests risks related to visibility or hydroplaning. So kind of zooming out, this slide pulls together some regional safety data that kind of reinforces what our studies have found. 7 of the top 15 highest crash intersections in Beaufort County are located along 15th Street, including the #1 location, which is at 15th and Washington. That same pattern holds for severity, with 7 of the top 15 highest severity intersections also being located along this corridor. The city of Washington ranks 3rd most concerning statewide for total crashes among municipalities with fewer than 10,000 residents. And Beaufort County ranks 37th worst out of all 100 counties for overall crash performance. Across the county, 1 in 4 crashes results in an injury. And in addition, multiple intersections along 15th Street are flagged in the region's high injury network. So to me, this kind of reinforces that the data that we've collected, not only that this is a locally important safety issue, but also a regionally significant safety issue. So now that we've looked into some of the existing conditions with traffic and crashes, I want to shift into what the 15th Street proposed project includes and how it directly responds to the issues we've just walked through. So this project focuses on improving 15th Street from US 17 Business to US 264. The proposed design is 4-lane, median divided, with dedicated pedestrian accommodations. The idea of a 4-lane median divided corridor was first identified for this segment in the 2014 Beaufort County Comprehensive Transportation Plan, and it has only been reinforced by our traffic and safety data. We are maintaining the 35-mile-an-hour speed limit, and the median and access management techniques will help reduce conflict points, especially to reduce those left turn conflicts we are seeing today. The goals of the project are to improve safety for vehicles and pedestrians, to reduce congestion, and to ensure the corridor can handle future traffic volumes without any degrading operations. So this slide is helpful because it shows a visual representation of the proposed typical sections for 15th Street. The top one is 15th Street from US 17 Business to Brown Street, and the bottom one is 15th Street from Brown Street to US 264. So as you can see across both segments, we are looking to maintain the 4 through travel lanes, but we have narrowed the travel lanes to 11 feet. And that was due to a previous request made by the city. NCDOT agreed to that implementation since it is a proven traffic calming measure, and it also allows for reduction in surrounding impacts. The design also includes a variable median that is 17.5 feet at its maximum width. That's in alignment with NCDOT's statewide standards. And this also provides the opportunity for landscaping, pedestrian refuge areas, which we'll talk a little bit about later on in the presentation. Curb and gutter are also included throughout both sides of the corridor, not as flashy, but very important to support stormwater management. And then you'll see from a pedestrian perspective, from US 17 to Brown Street, the south side includes a 10-foot multi-use path, and then you'll have a 5-foot sidewalk on the north side. East of Brown Street, the corridor transitions to 5-foot sidewalks on both sides. And we just believe these sections create a safer, more predictable corridor for drivers, pedestrians, And it also kind of stays consistent with DOT standards and hopefully brings us in closer alignment with the city's goals and the traffic and safety needs. All existing signal locations are being maintained with one exception. The signal at Washington Street is proposed to shift one block east to Pierce Street. Again, this was a request made by the city, and it came out of close coordination between the city and NCDOT's traffic safety team. And I wanted to highlight a few reasons for this change. Acknowledging that the Washington Street intersection has had some safety concerns. And so by relocating the signal, we're reducing those conflict points. Second, Pierce Street provides a more direct access point to Midtown Crossing, and the new signal there will help manage all of those movements safely and efficiently. Access to Midtown Crossing will still fully be maintained either through Pierce Street or through Washington Street, but moving the signal will reduce cut-through traffic within the development, again, eliminating conflict points at Washington Street, and will support future development along Pierce Street, which was the goal that the city had when this request was originally made. All of the signals along 15th Street will be rebuilt with metal poles and mast arms, and that will be at NCDOT expense. The one exception is at US 17 Business. DOT will provide a standard metal strain signal pole, and that's just to provide consistency with the rest of that intersection since it's at the very beginning of our project. At each signalized intersection, there'll be marked crosswalks, pedestrian beacons, and these will allow pedestrians dedicated time to cross. Lastly, I wanted to note that we have reviewed signal timing along the existing corridor to see if anything can be done. And with the current roadway layout, the signals are already optimized as much as they can be. So geometric roadway upgrades are the next step in improving any type of signal efficiency or multimodal safety. This slide provides a visual representation of the mid-block pedestrian crossings proposed along the corridor. These are designated crossing points located between the signalized intersections, giving pedestrians additional opportunities to cross safely. At each of these mid-block locations, we're proposing a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, or an RRFB. Essentially, when someone presses the button, the beacons will activate with a high visibility flashing pattern that will alert drivers to yield to that pedestrian. Each crossing will include a marked crosswalk, an ADA compliant curb ramp, and a median refuge area. And this refuge space allows pedestrians to cross 15th Street in 2 phases if needed. Lastly, we'll be setting the flashing and clearance times based on the actual crossing distance, and that will ensure those pedestrians have adequate time to complete their movement. So we've identified 3 locations for that mid-block RRFB that you've seen. Starting at the western end of the corridor closest to US 17, the first location we've identified is the proximity between Jackson Street and Paul Street. And I've marked this location with a yellow star so we can see it. This was kind of selected based on city feedback, observed pedestrian activity, and spacing between the adjacent signalized intersections. Because as a reminder, you will be able to cross at each signalized intersection. It's also kind of anchored by the destination of the Washington Square Mall. As discussed, a pedestrian refuge area will be provided, and that will be within that 17.5-foot median section, which I've highlighted in blue. The next mid-block crossing location we've identified will be in the proximity between Summit Avenue and North Respis Street. This is also denoted by that yellow star. This area serves, mostly residential, but some small business parcels, and was identified as a key connection point for people kind of walking those surrounding neighborhoods. The last mid-block crossing location we've identified will be in the proximity between Holloman Street and 13th Street. Again, we've got our big yellow star. And this area kind of serves a mix of residential properties, the 15th Street Church, nearby multifamily housing. It's a location where we consistently see people crossing today without a designated crossing point. So adding this protected option directly responds to that. So we've touched on the median, and there's been a lot of discussion about the median. And so I wanted to provide some context on how its width was selected and what it is providing for the corridor. So NCDOT's roadway design manual guides all of our state projects and provides a consistent design approach for state-owned roads, such as 15th Street, which is owned by the state. For corridors of this type, the manual recommends a 23-foot median where practical. It notes that a 17.5-foot median can also be an acceptable option. In this case, it allowed us to meet DOT standards while reducing impacts to adjacent properties and further align the corridor towards the city's goals. So bringing this visual back up, this is what our 17.5-foot median is anticipated to look like at its maximum width along the corridor, and I've highlighted that in blue. So diving into what does the 17.5-foot median actually allow us to do? So kind of orienting us to our map, I've highlighted the 17.5-foot median in blue here. We have our mid-block crossing shown with the yellow star. And what it does is it gives us enough width for a full 12-foot left turn lane, which I've highlighted in red, and a 4-foot raised island shown in orange. These features help manage those left turn movements that we discussed being so problematic and channelizes vehicles that are waiting to turn. So instead of today where vehicles stop in the middle of through traffic, drivers will now have a space to yield and also room to see opposing traffic, which reduces crash risks significantly. The median also creates a dedicated space for that pedestrian refuge area at the mid-block crossings, shown with the yellow star. Again, I noted this will allow people to cross 15th in 2 stages if they need, and it provides room for any type of landscaping or additional stormwater structures along the corridor. So overall, from our perspective, this median meets DOT standards and also delivers key safety and operational benefits that we need to keep, and while also being mindful about the surrounding properties. Again, here's our visual representation. We have our median highlighted in blue, and you can see how it tapers to provide that 12-foot turn lane and that 4-foot island. This is a variable median. So while only 22% of the corridor will actually experience that full 17.5-foot width, most of the corridor will be experiencing that turn lane and that island highlighted in orange. So we understand that the median width is a concern based on previous conversations, and we did just study the potential of reducing that median, shown in blue, to 4-foot islands, shown in orange, in certain locations. You can go ahead, Heather. Yep, so to visualize this, we would essentially study the geometric effects of taking certain areas that currently look like this and making them all areas that look like this. In our study of this, the 4-foot island, shown in orange, would potentially continue across instead of that blue median, and the turn lanes, shown in red, would be extended. From this study, we discovered the following things. First off, we lose the ability to include landscaping and pedestrian refuge areas because the 4-foot island cannot accommodate that. So that means no mid-block crossings or opportunity for aesthetic improvements. We also don't gain any right-of-way savings because the island and the turn lane, which are essential features to solve our safety problems, require the same overall footprint that median is taking up, and we would lose any median drainage features. So essentially, what we would be doing is adding more asphalt and losing the aesthetic and multimodal benefits that the full width median brings. We also discussed potentially flaring the corridor in and out to fit the turn lanes and save on right-of-way impacts, and unfortunately that is also not feasible. The intersections are just too close together to taper the corridor in and out, and utility layouts like to stay parallel, so they also would not allow for that kind of shift. So overall, throughout that study, utilizing a 4-foot island instead of the 17.5-foot median in certain locations was found unrealistic. It does not support safety, it does not support drainage, and it does not provide the pedestrian features we're looking for. And it also does not reduce any impacts. To kind of add to this, the Federal Highway Administration strongly encourages medians and refuge islands on roads just like 15th Street. 4-foot travel lanes or more, 35 miles an hour or greater, and higher than 9,000 average annual daily traffic. It is their recommendation that islands should be at least 8 feet wide to accommodate queuing pedestrians waiting to cross. And the addition of this refuge feature has been proven to reduce pedestrian crashes up to 56%, and even just a median with a marked crosswalk alone has been shown to reduce pedestrian crashes by nearly half. So as we introduce a raised median along the corridor, we do acknowledge that some existing left turn movements will no longer be available. And that is an intentional part of the safety strategy. Medians reduce conflict points, and we have a high level of left turn conflicts along this corridor. But it also means we need to provide a predictable place for drivers to make those movements. And that's where those U-turn bulbs come in. You'll see on the maps, and I've kind of shown this in a yellow dotted line, we've included U-turn bulbs at Minuteman Lane, Pierce Street, and Market Street. These locations were selected based on traffic movement counts, spacing along the corridor, and then coordination with our State Historic Preservation Office. We do have a historic boundary along this corridor. So at Market Street, there is no U-turn bulb in the southeast quadrant due to the State Historic Preservation Office requirements. Each bulb is designed to accommodate the city's requested delivery vehicle, which is a DL23, which kind of ensures that not just passenger cars, but also local service and delivery vehicles can make that maneuver comfortably. This slide highlights the utility upgrades included as part of the 15th Street project at NCDOT expense. We're upgrading storm drainage, underground and overhead power, water lines, and the sanitary sewer system. Camera inspections are currently underway to assess the condition of the existing storm drainage system, and we're coordinating closely with the ongoing Brown Street stormwater project to ensure everything kind of ties together at the end. This table kind of shows you where each utility is generally housed along the corridor. And then I've included this graphic to help orient us to the maps, but also better visualize this. So water lines, which are shown in that dark blue, run under the sidewalk on the north side. Sanitary sewer, shown in that green, is located under the multi-use path on the south side. Power is split with underground, generally on the south side in that dotted red line, and overhead is generally on the north in that solid red line. And then storm drainage, shown in teal, is on both sides. Something I wanted to note here is that we are utilizing the extended width of the pedestrian facilities to house a lot of our utilities, and this has reduced the need for additional easement impacts and also allows for accessible maintenance without disrupting the corridor in the future. To quickly highlight stormwater, because I know this is a concern along the corridor, let me just orient you to this map. This is provided by FEMA's Flood Risk Information System. The purple line represents the 15th Street project corridor, and everything else on the map shows the different FEMA designated flood hazard zones. So those solid blue areas represent the 1% annual chance of flood zones. The blue and white hatched areas are the floodway, which is where water is often expected to move the fastest and the deepest during a major storm event. And the yellow areas represent the 0.2% annual chance of flood. This project will significantly improve drainage along 15th Street. We are adding new structures, replacing aging pipes, and conveying runoff away from the travel lanes. However, while U5860 will greatly improve drainage conditions along the corridor, we acknowledge that it cannot alone resolve every flooding challenge within the city of Washington, as those extend beyond the project limits. Relocations. So property relocations are an unfortunate part of roadway projects. They are disruptive for families. They are disruptive for business owners. For this project, we are currently anticipating 17 relocations, 12 residential, and 5 business-owned parcels. The primary drivers behind these impacts are the proposed right-of-way needs and utility easements, and in several locations, the combination of roadway widening and upgraded utilities leaves no feasible way to avoid certain structures. We've provided this list because the majority of these properties that have been identified to have structure impacts have been shown at numerous previous outreach meetings. I will say most of the property owners have been informally coordinated with, but we have not made intentional individual contact with each of these property owners yet, as we are waiting for the finalization of right-of-way plans and the formal start of the right-of-way acquisition process to initiate that. So we were going to start right-of-way in February, and now it is in June, and that is when we will be reaching out to each of these affected property owners in a formal manner. Each parcel was evaluated on an individual basis, and the design team has worked to minimize these impacts, but as we move forward, the right-of-way office will then handle contacting them directly to ensure that they understand the process, their options, and the support available to them. And those properties are shown with red hatching on the maps. So with preliminary design work complete, the project has entered the project design phase. We're kind of at the tail end of project design, where plans are created to support construction and right-of-way acquisition. We are working to finalize right-of-way plans and will begin the right-of-way acquisition process this June. I wanted to highlight this. The 15th Street project is fully funded in the current state transportation improvement program. The updated schedule shows right-of-way acquisition beginning in June 2026, which was a shift from the previous February 2026 start date. Utility relocations will follow, and construction remains on track to begin in June 2028, which is unchanged. The total estimated cost for the project is $38.6 million. However, we do anticipate the cost of this project going up due to unit price changes, the addition of mid-block crossings, and just more refined designs. That's kind of typical for projects of this nature, especially when they've been going on for as long as they have, for the cost to go up. I want to be clear that the project is fully committed in NCDOT's program, and NCDOT will continue to hold 100% of the cost responsibility of the entire project, even if the total cost goes up. So right now, the city has no costs associated with U5860. The only items that would create a cost obligation for the city are aesthetic betterments, so things like powder-coated mast arms or specialty walkway treatments. Another thing that would cost the city, if requested, would be upgrades to the electrical transmission system, which has been discussed at a conceptual level as a long-term vision for the city. So kind of diving into that example with the transmission poles, because it has been discussed previously, we estimate that 52 poles could be potential combination distribution. That would cost about $9.1 million. NCDOT would contribute the cost for a standard distribution pole, which is what you currently have. That contribution would be $1.4 million, and then the city would be responsible for any type of the upgrade, which we would anticipate in this case, in this example, would be $7.7 million. To be completely clear, the city has not requested any betterments. There is currently $0 that this project costs the city. That was just an example of if they were to be a request of combination transmission distribution poles. And we're happy to look at that or any other betterment discussions closer if that's something that you're interested in. Looking at the second half of the slide on the right, the project brings substantial value to the community. Sidewalks and multi-use paths are estimated to cost about $1.5 million. The RRSBs with refuge islands will be about another $110,000. And then water and sewer upgrades alone total roughly $7.5 million. So that's work that would probably otherwise fall to the city to fund in the future. There are also some significant secondary project benefits, erosion control measures, drainage structures, new mast arm signals, and the replacement of all of the distribution poles. And all of these improvements are provided at NCDOT's cost and strengthen the city's infrastructure. And with that, that kind of concludes my presentation. I want to thank you for your time and for your patience this morning. We look forward to working with you as we proceed, and I've included my contact information as well as the project manager who will be stepping in while I'm on maternity leave. And I will turn it back over to you, Mary Beth, and we can kind of open up the floor to questions.
So I appreciate y'all bearing with us again. You know, technical difficulties are just that's just how things go these days. But we're here to take any questions. We have the maps, and so we'll just open it up to y'all.
Thank you. I did have a question concerning the the time duration and just the process of construction. What are you guys thinking, and what's realistic? I know there's estimates, and obviously these kind of projects run over sometimes. What's realistic estimate, and what is the plan for the traffic during the duration?
So one of the things that we have been working on, from previous meetings that we've had, I know that there's been a lot of concern about managing traffic, access to business, properties. We know that construction can be very impactful for communities anywhere we do work. So we have really sharpened our pens to look closer at the traffic management plans. But I do want to be clear that we're going to be maintaining traffic along the corridor during construction. And so we are currently working on refining that, like I said earlier. But regarding duration, I don't know that we have the exact duration determined at this point. But that's something that we can get back to you in the near future. But it's going to be, I guess, Cadmus, what would you say?
I'd say, at this, yep.
Oh, sorry.
I would say right now, again, we've got to really delve into the traffic control plans and everything, but a project of this size would typically be 2.5, 3-year project. On urban widening type projects like this, what we try to do is we try to build as much off to the side as we can, temporary pavement and things like that, in order to be able to maintain traffic through the corridor. But there will be times of lane closures, lane shifts, and things like that. To start the project off, typically we always move utilities first. So and typically it's to dry utilities. So we'll start moving power, fiber, things like that through the corridor. And then under contract, it'll be the wet utilities, the water, sewer, and then following storm drain. So it'll be a phased approach. Again, we hadn't gotten into it. We're still in the right-of-way plan stage right now. Traffic control plans comes a little bit after that. But we always make every effort we can to try and maintain traffic the best we can. But there will be times that we're coming across a driveway with a driveway pipe or with sewer. So there will be some intermittent disruptions. But especially where there's locations or parcels where there's multiple driveways, we may be shutting one down, but trying to make sure we don't shut more than one down at one time. It's our goal to maintain access to all businesses and residents, throughout the duration of the job. And again, there'll be some temporary impacts, but not wholesale.
Thank you. More specifically, I was thinking about how long 2 of these lanes might be closed down. So I'm assuming that we would shut down half to work on it and work in stages that way. I know this is a main corridor for fire, for EMS. So I'm just wondering how long, because it's going to bottleneck, I'm assuming, for 2 years is what you're saying.
Right.
So is that what we should be thinking? 2 years of this road is essentially bottlenecked down to 2 lane at some section?
I don't know, again, that we've gotten far enough into the traffic control plans to say we're gonna put it down to a two-lane, two-way for the whole duration of the job, right? So what we'll try and do is build as much as we can behind the existing curb that's out there now. And then there should be some pattern changes where, you know, we may shift traffic to the outside, move them all the way across, work on the other side, and then split, work the median. Again, we're not at that stage yet to really get into the weeds of like how traffic will be managed. But again, I mean, I would anticipate lane closures during day. Typically, we have restrictions where we don't allow them during peak hour. So from like 7 a.m. to 9 a.m., no lane closures, or 4 p.m. to 6. When we see the highest traffic counts, those are the sort of things that we'll put in our contracts to try and mitigate, you know, traffic during construction. But there, as Heather said, there will be some impacts, but we're trying to come up with a way to maintain traffic the best we can through the corridor, through the life of the job.
No, I can absolutely see you guys have been working on this, because I know I saw some of the things that had been concerns earlier. I was also wondering, she mentioned the 17-foot median. I see it's 9 here. Is it 17 foot most of the way down? Is that what we're looking at?
So
17
one
and a
thing
half?
that she had pointed out, so because the median has been a conversation piece and everything, so we looked at it, and for only 22% of the length of this project is the median 17 foot. So it's a variable width median. As you can see, like right up in here at the intersections, it's a 4-foot median. So where you gain the 17, it'll taper to 17 when you're about midway between the intersections, right? So from Carolina Avenue coming down is the 4-foot wide median, and then where you don't have a need for that left turn lane any longer, it flares out to be the 17 and a half. But you can see it's only 17 and a half for that distance, and then it tapers back down to a 4-foot median in order to develop this left turn lane here. So again, you have the 17 and a half foot wide median at short sections through in between different intersections. But again, it's only 22% of the whole length of all the island we have on the job. It's only 17 and a half for 22% of that.
Sure. And I'm guessing that this has been thought out, so that, you know, we have the big fire trucks that they just ride right over the median. Is that typically their?
They can. I mean, they're mountable. I mean, they're intended to provide separation for the through movements and to indicate dedicated turn lanes, but there is the ability to be able to drive over them.
Correct.
And concerning like the larger 18-wheelers that have to get into, say, AutoZone, right? I don't know that AutoZone gets deliveries from those big trucks. How would they get in there? They just got to go up and back down? Is that generally the thought process?
So the intersections have been designed, as Allison mentioned, to accommodate like a typical delivery size truck, right? So an 18-wheeler would need to find we'd have to have a different route for them to be able to get in if they're receiving, deliveries through 18-wheelers. In order to accommodate 18-wheelers making this turn, it has a greater impact on right-of-way, right? So we figured, 18-wheelers could have a different route to get able to get into these locations if they needed to, but the intersections are accommodating the typical box truck type delivery.
And when this project was restarted, it was the utmost concern for the city to minimize those impacts. So that was part of those conversations, just trying to minimize property and business impacts.
No, I don't think you would do this project with just 18-wheelers in mind. I'm just trying to run through all the scenarios here, all the concerns. I have a few others. I'm going to grab them. I don't know. I'll yield if any of you guys have a couple questions while I look through some notes here.
I was wondering how long each phase of the construction was going to take, because it's starting at 17 and 15, and then it's going to what section is going to be the first phase?
So I don't know that we necessarily have the phases identified yet, because it's going to depend on the utilities, right? And then the storm drain, so the amount of work that has to be done. What we try to do is we try to get utilities moving ahead of other items, right? So go out, start moving the power, and then start freeing up areas, and then gas would follow, water would follow, and then it starts opening up areas for storm drain. So, typically we'll try and get started in areas where we need to, have the utilities moving early on. But we would have to look at, where do we need to start in order to maintain drainage through the area? You know, that's one of the things that we really got to look at is we need to be able to maintain drainage in this area. So there's a phase between the drainage that you have out there now and what we're putting in. So how do we need to work a certain phase in order to make sure it's all tying in together in order to be able to maintain drainage? So again, you know, we haven't gotten into that level of detail as far as, you know, figuring out exactly where we're starting, what the sections are going to be. But again, you know, it won't be that we're completely done with any one section before we start another, right? So
Sure.
it's start down the line with utilities, start down the line with water sewer, start down the line with storm drain, and then you start building the curb and doing other features. So it should be, you know, running concurrently throughout the corridor once things get going.
So when it comes to drainage, the pipes that are already under the ground underneath 15th Street, I don't know what the diameter of them are, but, you know, let's say they're 6 inches. Is it going to be increased with this plan
So
for higher flow, I guess?
we are looking at all of them, and there are some upsized pipes and everything. You want to speak to this?
Yeah, that's correct. So our hydraulic engineer team, they will look at the existing conditions. We're actually, and I think Allison mentioned this briefly, is even though we have the existing information, we also recently did some pipe investigations where we cameraed the pipes. Again, just trying to, even if it's sized appropriately, existing condition, is just to make sure that that condition is in good shape. We don't want to, you know, do all this work and then, you know, and then have an issue down in the near
Right.
future. We don't want that.
Right.
So they will look at the existing pipes, and if they need to be upsized, they will. But we also take into consideration where that water is moving to and any changes in patterns. They have to study the whole area and where all the water is coming into the corridor and where it's leaving.
So my concern with that was that, you know, if we increase the flow and the size of the pipes, you know, going from north of 15th south towards, you know, downtown, the waterfront, there's a lot of areas in the residential side that already have flooding in yards when there's, you know, heavy rainfall, storms, whatnot. We don't want to put an undue burden on the system by increasing flow or capacity with it. So that's considerations that are being taken or
Yes.
going to be taken.
Yeah, so our, and I'm not a hydraulic engineer, I will preface it with that, but I do know that we have expressed the concerns of the community regarding existing flooding conditions here. They are very mindful of our drainage and where it's outfalling, and looking at that closely, I can provide you more detailed answer if that's helpful from our hydraulics team.
I appreciate that. And
Yeah, we can
I
do
just
that.
have 2 other questions, and then I'm all good.
And real quick, just to follow up on Heather's comment and everything, so we look at it, right, both upstream and downstream on all of our projects, our hydraulics engineer, because we don't want to have an adverse impact on either people on this side of it, you know, by increasing road height and things like that, but then
Right.
also, so there's that balance of trying to maintain, you know, as close as we can to what's out there now as far as not creating problems for people upstream, also not creating problems for people downstream by what we're doing with our storm drain system.
Where is the plan to have all of it flow out to? Is there a place where y'all have identified where it's going to tie into? Is it?
I know that one of the larger outfalls is near the Burger King property. There's a large box culvert there. I mean, that's one of the major
Okay.
outfalls on this corridor. I know there's different ones further down, but I'd have to let you know where we're outletting all the water.
There's several different drainage areas. So like in this section, it's typically up in the corner here of 15th and 17th.
Okay.
And then, you know, around the Market Street area, there's a drainage area there. And then there's one up near the hospital where the city currently has their Brown Street project going on. So it's not that all the water in this whole corridor is getting funneled to one location. We're maintaining existing drainage patterns there, right? And there are several different drainage areas that ultimately they all lead to the river, right? But they don't
Sure.
directly funnel to one location to get to the river.
Okay, great, thanks. Go ahead.
So just following up with what he was saying there, so we're not increasing drainage capacity on 15th Street, because that's something that we had been concerned about, that if we add drainage capacity like you're talking about, at some point, that's actually going to back it up. If it's draining faster here and slower towards the river. So we're just we're not actually changing this very much at all. I mean, updating it, but not changing the flow, is that correct?
I would say we're updating the drainage infrastructure, like some of it, sorry, I will eventually get used to the microphones, I promise. So we have to, I'm trying to, with your question, your concern is we're pushing more, is that we're pushing more water to a certain location? Is that, or is that, am I misspeaking?
No, that's right. So if I had a house on one of these, that if we have a little bit of flooding now, if we increase the amount of water coming down here, but we don't increase it going towards the river, that's going to mean we have a lot of flooding where we currently have little. So are we increasing some of the stormwater here, the stormwater drainage?
I think based on our, okay.
So I'm a hydraulic engineer. No, when we go in and look at it, we look at the drainage areas, and basically we take the existing catch basins and everything. So one thing you have is you have your surface area, and your surface area is dependent on your impervious and everything else. And then what we look is, when you look at capacity, you look at your pipes, okay? So even if you increase your capacity of your pipes, but you don't increase your impervious area and everything else, you can carry more. The thing is, we've looked at everything, we keep the same drainage areas, we look at what's out there, and what we're doing is we're updating the pipes. So if you have somebody who's historically flooded, we're not going to increase any more flooding on that person. So in essence, so if that person got 2 inches of rain and they had flooding in their parking area, they're still going to have 2 inches. We basically looking at improving the whole system, okay? But the thing is, we're not necessarily going to decrease the flooding because it's a lot bigger than that. I mean, we're only improving a small corridor. So that's the thing. So capacity of the pipes will basically have some benefits because you don't have siltation in the pipes. I mean, these are new pipes. So there's a whole lot of things that will improve, but it will be minuscule, if that makes sense.
No, that's exactly what I was thinking. We're not hurting it. I mean, this project isn't designed to fix our stormwater issue. This is designed for traffic, but it's neither going to help nor hurt in any meaningful way.
No, it's not going to help or hurt.
Okay.
But that being said, it doesn't necessarily mean that, if there's a bigger rainfall and everything else, because rainfalls are variable. So it's not going to impact that property owner, but there will be some benefits. But the benefits that you might see will be a little bit localized, because at the end of the day, I mean, you can have a rainfall over here, and then the other person doesn't get as much rainfall. So if that makes sense.
If I might, Mayor Pro Tem, just to give you an idea of what we saw last year, part of the understanding of what was just kind of explained, like this isn't designed to improve the yard waste or the yard water, but we can do things to help mitigate as they come in and start to connect, which is why we saw the work being done at the hospital area on the Brown Street project. Before people kind of understood what was going on, it was if we can prep this area first, if the city can take this on first, and when the state comes in, by the time they connect, we're ready to take on that amount of water.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask my other 2 questions. I know I asked you before we started. I'm just going to do it again because we're recording now. Just using Arby's as an example, the proposed drainage utility easement areas here, that acquisition from DOT is not going to actually affect any of the land. It's not going to remove any parking spaces. The business would still be able to utilize them. If there was only going to be an issue with drainage, that's when somebody would have to do something, correct?
Right, so in the end, post-construction, yes, we wouldn't be impacted. So during construction, the purple area that you're speaking to is going to house our storm drain or utilities, right? It's a drainage or utility easement. So we're anticipating where the purple is to have utilities or have storm drain in that area. post-construction, then it would, you know, revert back to the property owner being able to have use of it. But in the event, like, you know, we had to come in and the water line had to be worked on, then, you know, the city would have access to it. It's a permanent easement
Okay.
in there. So the city would have the ability to go in and access their water or sewer line, or if we needed to do some storm drain work in that area.
Okay,
But it often returns back and is usable as it was pre-construction.
okay. And then the only other question that I had was it's not this map, but the construction that's going to be taking place at the primary entrance for the hospital, the emergency room there, how is that going to impact, you know, people within the county being able to get in there, or EMS when that construction's going on there?
Good question. And Allison, you can add to this at any point, but we met with the hospital several months ago, and they gave us their list of questions and concerns, and that was one of them. We talked about the utility work in front of one of their entrances, and addressed their questions about access, and I think one of them was an employee parking lot that we were going to be affecting temporarily with our construction activities. And so we agreed to follow up with them as we got farther along in the project, to give them regular updates so that way they can notify their staff and their team, as well as any type of effects to that intersection or that location for their needs. Allison, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to go back and touch on the stormwater for a second, if that's okay. We do have a specific hydraulic engineer who actually works on the modeling for all of this, which is why we all know high level where the water's going, but they are in the nitty gritty of the model, and we can always provide some additional context from them because they're kind of our specialists. The best way to describe it is, you know, we're increasing the capacity of a system that can accommodate larger rain events, but without improving, you know, existing downstream infrastructure. I would say that 15th Street can expect to, you know, have similar effects with heavy rainfall. Other than with the curb and gutter, we're able to channelize that water away from travel lanes. So as opposed to, you know, where does the water go? It goes the same place it goes now. We're just kind of working on the channelization and kind of setting this area up to leverage future other improvements like the Brown Street Stormwater Project to tie into. But again, it's a system, and the system itself has to be improved as a whole. So just wanted to touch on that to the best of my ability. And then we did meet with the hospital. Yes, they're aware of what's going on, and we're going to coordinate closely with them. Part of our community studies assessment is to reach out to hospitals, EMS, fire, et cetera. So they're all aware of this project, and that coordination will only, you know, continue to increase. We've talked with the hospital about phasing construction, and they will be highly engaged during the entire process.
All right. So I have a couple of questions as well too, and this is more for the community. We've talked quite a bit throughout my tenure here, but I'm looking for some explanations to questions and thoughts that the community have received or they may have. One, just starting where you left off with speaking with the hospital, talking to fire and safety, I think it's been kind of painted that North Carolina Department of Transportation is the boogeyman, and you've come in and told us exactly what you will do. But it seems like you've been connecting with necessary entities from fire and safety to our healthcare, our emergency departments throughout this time. Is that safe to say that, or did you kind of come in and tell them exactly what you're going to do and they had to make the adjustment?
So I'll start with that question. So we have, at least we're Division 2, so we cover 8 counties, as Mary Beth said. And so we have several larger projects that are ongoing in construction. But one of the things that we do, not just from our requirements, as Allison was noting about the community impact assessment, We get contacted quite a bit, and we also go out to local meetings and requests and things like that. For example, Rotary meetings, HOA meetings, things like that, and not just on this project, others. So the more we can get information out, it's a mutually beneficial situation for all parties. We know that this project is going to result in some changes, and it's going to have some impacts, and we want to make sure that the community is engaged earlier in that process and get that information out there. So that is always our intent. And we also, as Allison said, have processes in place to do that. So yes, we've had quite a bit of engagement. I know we had a public meeting in February. We had a follow-up meeting in May. We've had some other small group meetings. This project has restarted in 2023, so there was previous meetings related to that, and so quite a bit.
Next question. I know since I've been speaking with you, and you as in your department, there was always the idea of, hey, this is the original design, but there's still work to be done. For instance, you know, you kind of spoke to different locations of stoplights after conversation with the community. Was this design ever made out to look like, well, you guys are from Raleigh, or you ever driven to Raleigh from here before? Was this design ever made out to look like 264 between Greenville and Raleigh?
No, and one thing I do want to go backwards a little bit, maybe Sam, you want to add in. So where this project comes from, this comes from the community. This project is submitted through our local planning organization to address a need. And this project is scored through prioritization, which is a state mandated process. That's not specific to our area, that's for the whole state of North Carolina. And so that's what's driven this project, and is a great opportunity of funding that we have for our community. So again, there's no intent to make this like Raleigh. This is to address community needs, safety needs, traffic needs. As you guys know, funding is always challenging, so this is a huge deal for us in our community to have this. And so we're from this community, we're from this area, and so that is why it's so important. So that's not the intent.
So, great segue into my next question then. There's been a lot of conversation, and this was prior to me being elected to serve. There's a lot of conversation around a previous plan that was created. I think 2 mayors back, that council decided to have another engineering firm or some other firm engaged into creating something that the community would like to see. But then I think the community was told that because that plan wasn't accepted in its totality, you ignored the entire concept of that plan. Are you aware of any plan that was presented to DOT by another firm to say this is what we'd rather have 15th Street look like, or was it an idea of this is where we can go? Can we work from here? Like what, well, I guess my first question is, because it's kind of compounded right now, is are you aware of any other plan that was presented to North Carolina DOT by the city of Washington?
Yes, and so there was a previous plan by Stantec to do their design was a road diet. And so it had also a lot of pedestrian features incorporated. Several years ago, I know that was looked at closely by the department, and with the future traffic needs, it was not a holistic, did not holistically address the needs of the project. And number 2, and another important point, is that was not what was submitted through our transportation process for scoring as a submittal. So it's really those 2 main things. Allison, anything else to add on that point?
Yeah, so there were a lot of items from that plan that were taken to be included as a part of our proposal. It was kind of a marriage between our existing proposal, which was created from the Beaufort County comprehensive transportation plan, and then taking, feedback received. Believe it or not, we had a public meeting in 2016 on this project. So taking feedback received in 2016, yes, a decade ago, and then also feedback received from, this Stantec plan. So that plan came about in 2020, 2021, and the things that we do have incorporated from that plan, they recommended a 5-foot sidewalk and a 10-foot multi-use path, which we have. They recommended ADA compliant curb ramps, which we have. They recommended pedestrian signals, high visibility crosswalks, and mast arm signals, all of which we're funding. They recommended the use of local foliage and landscaping, which we are including. They did recommend like a gateway monument, which can be included if the city is wanting to request that as a betterment. So there's a lot of aspects of that plan that have been incorporated, and I think the most interesting part of that plan is it does highlight the issues with left turn lanes, and it does include medians as part of that proposal. And it's not a continuous median, but it does include medians and acknowledges the benefits of a median as a part of that plan. It's just in order for it to align with NCDOT standards, we need a continuous median. That plan was also studied from a traffic level, and it was also, we submitted it for a mock score in our prioritization program. And because it does not align with NCDOT standards, it did not score high enough to be considered for funding. So that study has been thoroughly vetted. And from our perspective, we have taken a lot of elements from that study that were, valid and helpful, and incorporated it as a part of our proposal.
So it sounds like a lot of that study was actually incorporated into what we have here, but because of state criteria, not city criteria, you couldn't take the entire plan and make it functional for this area. So there was a word spoken in there, or a phrase used in there, that if you could just give us a small snippet of what this means. Road diet. What is this about?
So the road diet would be to take it from a 4-lane undivided section as it is now, and to put 1 lane in each direction, and then, I think Stantec Design had in the left turn lanes, but essentially you're taking away from that capacity. Right now, today, we have 2 lanes going both directions. It would be reducing that to 1 lane each direction, and then having the left turn lanes at the signalized intersection. To kind of follow up on what Allison was saying, the plan that we have in front of us today is meeting the purpose and need of the project from a roadway standpoint, but also pulling in as many of the aspects from the Stantec Design, talking about the pedestrian facilities, the median, and incorporating, as much as we could of that design and what the city has requested to date, while maintaining the purpose and need of the project, and that is to improve safety and to, not compromise congestion, which a road diet would do. I mean, we've seen the traffic out on 15th Street, and to put 1 lane in each direction, it doesn't function.
So, and I'll wrap up with this. I just want to say thank you, and especially for the sidewalk piece, because we do have a new school going in at the end of that corridor. So parents and families would be able to now walk without having to get on the actual roadway. They would be able to walk from neighborhoods to school and back from school safely, as well as just overall fitness for the community. Folks will now be able to get out and ride their bikes, which I think was a big deal when we looked at safety as well too from the previous council standpoint, as well as those who have mobility challenges would now be able to utilize their wheelchairs and walkers or what have you, that would help them become mobile again without having to play, for lack of better terms, that game Frogger. You don't have to kind of duck and dodge through traffic now. It seems like you guys have taken in a lot of what Stantec in the community we're talking about way before I even took the seat to also continue to move this project forward. So I do appreciate you listening to the community. Like you said, this was 2016 when you were having conversations. And then we moved back after 2023 that started up again. So thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. I was going to follow up with a few things. because approaching this as a casual citizen, you look at it one way. Approaching it, sitting up here, you look at it a little bit differently. You know, one of the things that stands out is that a handful of us ran on an idea of lowering taxes, and then you get up here and we look at this budget, and if the city of Washington wanted to do this project, we would have to raise property taxes by 50% for 20 years. So this is a very valuable project to the city of Washington. I think some folks recognize that faster and sooner than others. I don't know that everybody understands what this project means to the city of Washington. Now that being said, there are a number of people who have a lot of concerns, and I think that's why you're here, and that's why we're here, to bring those up and to flesh them all out. No project can be all pros and no cons. And you'd mentioned the road diet, and so there's a few things that in the discussion of this project that have always come up. It seems that this project would facilitate speed, right? It's a 2-lane in each direction with a median that is essentially the same format that we would see on I-40. We have stoplights. This is the kind of road structure that would facilitate speed for sure. And you had mentioned 3 fatalities over the last 5 years, and I want to say 2 of those were pedestrian. And now we're incorporating additional pedestrian and biker paths on a roadway that in all likelihood will encourage people to drive a little bit faster. And we had mentioned the Stantec plan, which had been presented and was rejected for its own reasons, but in some measure that had been incorporated on 5th Street right here in town in Washington. It used to be 4-lane, and they dropped it. So we have some historical data. I think 5th Street, 15th Street are comparable traffic patterns or amount of volume of traffic. Do we have any statistics that would show what happened to the accidents, the fatalities, and all that stuff down 5th Street after this transition?
I don't know that we do. It's something we can certainly look into to see. I don't have it readily available. But it kind of speaks towards the speed and everything in this typical section, as you mentioned, you know, trying to relate it to like Raleigh and stuff. Right now we have 2 lanes in each direction. We're not changing that. All we're doing is providing a left turn lane at these signalized intersections, and then incorporating the median for access control. A lot of the problems we have right now are people trying to make those left-hand turns sitting in a through lane. So we're not adding any more through lanes than what's currently out there today. It's just the incorporation of these left turn lanes at the signalized intersections in order to make it a safer move for people who want to cross traffic. As far as speed, you know, one of the things that we've incorporated, I think in coordination with the city, was going with the 11-foot lanes. Typically, we would like to put like a 12-foot lane out here. Studies have shown the narrower lane widths is just in itself a method of trying to reduce speed. Having the median down the middle, especially if part of it's landscape, that's going to be an extra way to help mitigate speeds in this area, right? So speeding's already an issue out there right now. I mean, people are exceeding the posted speed limit right now today, right? And, you know, having it in the 2-lane pattern in each direction it is right now, it's a wide open corridor. So if anything, you know, it would be that what we're doing with narrowing the lane widths, adding the medians, should be a mitigation or a speed reduction feature.
And I will just add that medians are proven to help with traffic speed. So they are a proven countermeasure.
And if I could just add to that, I mean, what you're talking about speeding is kind of a human behavior shift. And, you know, we can implement medians, we can implement, you know, 11-foot lanes. And those are all proven traffic calming measures. But I think the hope is also maybe psychologically having some pedestrian accommodations, having those mid-block crossings. You now have crosswalks at your signals. We are actively, you know, triggering folks to look for pedestrians and look for bicyclists. And the hope is that that can also bring speeds down along the corridor.
Also, if I might, I believe there was a stage in his plan that crosswalk crosswalks weren't implemented yet, like not shown yet. They were discussed, but the locations weren't absolute just yet. But because of the interest of the community at the time, and because of certain groups that had came about saying it wasn't this was gonna be a whole different type of plan, North Carolina DOT showed the plan as it was, saying this is still a working document. I think the part about it being a working document kind of got mixed and lost in translation, right? But I do remember also, because of the trees and the grass and the calming of that piece of it all, there were community members that were concerned this was just going to be, for lack of a better term, like a concrete jungle, just straight concrete and just kind of cold. But, you know, we spoke about that, and at that time, it was said that we can go one or two routes. We can keep it a concrete jungle, or we can put some calming spaces in there with grass and trees. The part that would be the city's responsibility would be, once construction is complete, we have to cut the grass, right? So, but that was something that we were in talks about, is kind of a trade-off. Like, I mean, it's just a couple of feet of grass here to add for that aesthetic look. As well as, if I'm not mistaken, our previous chief spoke to this in safety for the officers, to be able to make the turns safely, because right now it's a struggle for some of the officers to be in that pass-through lane and still turn and protect the rest of the community without causing extra accidents. So this was as well spoken on by him in open meeting, I believe, of something that would allow his officers to be able to safely make those U-turns and safely kind of direct traffic some more. And I guess I'm saying that just to kind of speak to that speed part of it all. So yeah, so.
Thanks for explaining all of that. Is this project, once it's completed, was there any thought on it helping alleviate traffic on 5th Street?
Yeah, I mean, I think it will be.
So I can,
Go ahead, Allison.
sorry. I was just going to say, look, going back to our traffic forecast methodology that we had kind of touched on, and those travel demand models that I discussed. So we have the Washington travel demand model, and then we also use the statewide travel demand model. And so while we haven't done a specific study on what type of traffic would be, you know, more or less diverted to 5th Street, if any, but it does take into account parallel routes, and it'll take into account any funded other DOT projects or any type of large development that we're made aware of.
Okay. And then just two other questions with that. Talking about large developments or, you know, future growth 5, 10, 15 years down the line. If the city were to get to a point, you know, there's a main healthcare corridor, I guess you could call it, by the hospital coming up, honestly, close to the Washington Square Mall all the way through. If the city wanted to add, you know, something like a bus route, could this plan support adding, you know, bus stops on the sidewalk with stops on the road, or is that something that would have to get changed if that was, you know, a plan for the city in the future?
I would say, I mean, based on the configuration that we have out there now, it would support it. I mean, you wouldn't have the areas to pull the bus in. I mean, so it would probably take some modifications. A lot of times we want to get the bus out of the travel lane. So the travel lanes themselves would support the bus route, but there would probably need to be some modifications where we have the bus turnouts. A lot of times we'll have it where the curb goes in, the bus will pull in, bus stop will be right there, and then they come back out into traffic. So as the plan is now, it would take some modifications in the future if you wanted an actual bus, you know, stop.
And then the only other question I had was that, so from my understanding, the city, at its current point, has voted to approve the project to move forward. If nothing happens after this meeting is done today, this project will move forward as planned, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So there's no real ask from DOT from the city at this point?
No, as we've talked about, you know, since we've been moving forward on this since 2023, right? With full support of the city and with the RPO. So,
Right.
you know, our goal today was come and try and answer any questions we could, but we've had full support, and that's how we've been moving forward for the last 3 years, with full support. So, you know, our intent is to go to right-of-way in June.
Right, okay. And then with the county recently putting out their resolution in support of the project, in the city, we've gone back and forth for 2 months now of either putting a resolution in support or a resolution in opposition to the project. If the city moved forward with a resolution in opposition, which I'm not saying is the plan right now, I'm just asking, would a resolution opposing the project from the city cancel the project at this point? Or is DOT at the point with the work that they've put into it, support from the county, support to the state, that this project is moving forward either way?
So if the council decided to adopt such a resolution, this project was entered and approved through the department's State Transportation Improvement Plan, our STIP process. And that's the local government working with the planning organization. So if the council wanted to do that, then they would just have to send something to the planning organization. And then the planning organization could look and decide whether they wanted to proceed, continue to support the project or not. Once they did that, then the department would look at the needs of the city, the planning organization, and others, and balance that with, there is a safety issue out here, and it is a department road, and we have to do something to mitigate those safety issues. And so it would be a process.
Right.
You know, but does the city have authority to remove this project? They do not.
Okay, that's what I understand. So a resolution in opposition would basically just mean that the RPO and the TAC, TCC, whatever T going forward, would have to go back through and look at the project, and then DOT would have to reevaluate it. But more than likely, given the safety concerns and the amount of work that's gone into it over the last few decades, it sounds like DOT would just move forward with the project regardless.
No,
No.
we would
Okay.
we would take the city's desire, the planning organizations, but the whole process is this project was submitted in the STIP
Yes, ma'am.
through the planning organization, so that's the first step. And
Okay.
then that comes to DOT. And again, we would evaluate everyone's wishes and the need of this project. So have there been projects that got removed from the STIP? Yes. Have there been projects where the local government didn't want it, the planning organization did? DOT's gone either way. I mean, we would just evaluate everybody's concerns.
Thank you.
And Mary Beth, if I could add, just be specific about that there's no swappage or removal of these funds. You know, the funds are committed for the proposed project. And if the funding, you know, if the project were to be no longer, it would simply return back to the department's division bucket of funds and go to the next highest scoring project in our prioritization program, which is probably not in Beaufort County, just to be clear. So there isn't, let's use these funds for this instead. It would leave Washington.
And I just want to follow up on what Allison is saying. They do update the STIP every 2 years. And so it was about last fall when all new projects were resubmitted. They are looking and scoring those projects now. And so it'll be next year, 2027, when we actually see what that updated STIP looks like. And so any other project would have to go through the next cycle. And like I say, it's every 2 years. And, you know, I don't want anybody to think it's threatening, oh, we're going to take this money. But in this program, this money was set for this project. And so if this project does not occur, the money goes back into the buckets, and it just continues with what's already in that STIP now. And the reality is there is not another project in this area.
So I'm gonna lean into that just a little bit more. So this isn't this isn't like a grant where I can pick and choose what part of the project that I want to go with, and deny the other parts. This is, you take this as a project whole, or we may have to move on.
Yes, and this project was entered as a 4-lane meet-in divided facility. And so we have to stick within those constraints. We can't just change to a 2-lane highway.
So when it comes to the numbers that were presented today, when it comes to infrastructure, because we spoke a lot about infrastructure, right? The amount of money that it would take to improve the infrastructure and the amount of money it would take just to do this project as a whole, let me start there. It sounds like if something else comes up, that would have to go back to conversation or your department and go through that. It seems like as we push this project down farther, the price goes up. Because I'm quite sure it wasn't 38 million 10 years ago. But it seems like the more that comes in, the more the price goes up, and the more that we will be requiring the state to do eventually, which may put us in a position sooner or later to say, hey, we're starting to price ourselves out, what are we gonna do? As well as, and this is kind of the second part to this, I just wanna be clear at what you just told us, and I'm saying us as the community. This is not a project that we tell you we're only gonna take this part of the plan, and the rest of it, we don't want it. You can just go away. We're only gonna fix the pipes, and the rest of the roadway, you guys can take that money and go somewhere else with it. It doesn't work like that, is what I'm hearing. And I know I'm being kind of direct in that, but our community has been led to this idea that there's bits and pieces of this grant opportunity or this funding opportunity that we can take maybe the $12 million to fix our pipes, and the other 20-something million is you can go give that to some other place and that's fine.
Right, so the purpose and need of the project is to improve safety along this corridor, right? The benefactor of that is, while we're there, instead of building a brand new road and then not addressing drainage, not addressing, aging infrastructure, is while we're there, we need to make it right. So when we walk away, we have the most longevity of the road, the storm drain, the utilities while we're out there. So this isn't a utility-only project. It's not a storm drain-only project. It's a project to improve safety throughout this corridor, and because it was a project that was selected and has funding, we have the ability to upgrade the utilities, upgrade the storm drain, add pedestrian features as part of that project. But no, to answer your question, it's not we can take certain segments of it, pursue that. I mean, this is the project is to improve safety in this corridor.
I just want to add to what Camus just stated, which he's absolutely correct, because it's submitted as a median divided 4-lane facility. And so, for your example, you can't just do utilities. You can't just do a component. It has to meet the intent of that submittal. I just wanted to reiterate, we've tried to make adjustments where we can, and a good example of that is the mid-block crossings. We received a lot of feedback at public meetings, citizens and so forth, the city as well, just again about connecting communities and things of that nature. So that's one of the things that we were able to modify to better help that need. So apart from like minor things along those lines, that's really where we have that ability. But again, like we said in the presentation, even if those unit prices that, costs, you're right, continues to go up, the department has this fully committed, and so if those prices continue to go up, which we fully expect, we are committed to cover that cost apart from betterments.
And one last thing I was just going to add to that is it is a state-owned facility, and so the goal is to build it to statewide, state-owned facility standards, but also acknowledging that we are threading a needle here and there have been some other requests, and we've kind of worked to satisfy, all of those desires. Proposal.
So it seems like, again, you guys gave us criteria and said, function the best you can for your community within that criteria. And with that, again, I want to say thank you for that, because it sounds like the main goal of this project is safety first. The community is getting the added bonus of the improved infrastructure work here because this project is on your radar now. So it's not like you came in here and said, let me fix the flooding, let me bring in other engineers and professionals here because Washington has a flooding issue by the water. It was, hey, we own property there that is causing an issue for that community, and that issue has kind of raised flags here saying, hey, with these numbers and this data research that has been done here, something that we own is causing a problem. We need to go and address that problem. But since we're here, they seem to be having some problems under this as well too, so let's fix that as well as we go along. Because like you said, you don't want to fix it, and the next thing you know, we're calling you saying, hey, there's a little sinkhole out here that you didn't fix the pipe on, right? So again, we appreciate your straightforwardness, we appreciate your approach to this, because again, as the state being the boogeyman that folks like to paint you out to be, it seems like you actually did take the community's direction on this while still keeping safety as paramount.
This is I can't imagine this is a terribly unique type of project. Lots of small towns in North Carolina. Have you all done this in other places where you can say before there were, I mean, safety is the issue, so before these were the statistics and after? I mean, you said you had expectations up there of reducing things, and what are some other projects maybe historically we can just look at and say, hey, we did this in Spring Lake on a similar road and had these kind of results? Do you guys have that sort of thing?
I know this type of project we do statewide, not just in this area. One thing I'll add specifically is, you know, we all know that there's been a lot of conversations about the median and concerns related to that. And there has been research that shows that people will continue to go to businesses, that they go to destinations and everything of that nature. So this is not the first of its kind. This is not the first time or the second time we've done a project of this nature. If you're looking for a specific project in our area, I'm trying to think of one, but we do projects like this of similar size and nature of similar communities throughout the state of North Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, an example of one, we're just getting started with Allen Road in Greenville. You know, it's a existing facility where we're, you know, widening that facility. You know, over the years, fire tower. You know, we've done this, as Heather mentioned, quite a lot. So, you know, as we do urban widenings, they are going to have impact on people, right? You know, no one knows. And to kind of go back to what Mary Beth said, there's a lot of stakeholders, right? I mean, there's the city. You asked a question about that, but there's, you know, there's also the people who are using it. I mean, we got 20,000 people a day using it, right? So I think that's more than just the people within the city limits that are using it. It's, you know, DOT's involved in the safety aspect that it's, you know, come to, you know, proven that we're failing in 4 out of 5 categories, you know, against the statewide criteria. So there's a safety concern out there. So it's trying to take into consideration all the stakeholders and give the best product, understanding that we won't be able to satisfy 100% of everybody, you know, along this corridor. But, you know, we're trying to do what's best for, you know, those stakeholders.
If this plan is delayed or stopped, when is our next chance of funding? If it's put back into the queue, is it going to be 10 years, 20 years, maybe in 2 years?
So, and Sam, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but again, we just last fall, it's updated every 2 years, so last fall, new projects were submitted. Those are being scored now, and it will be in spring of next year or early next year when we have a new plan. So it's 2 years, plus if you wanted to submit a new plan, it's going to be, it won't make this 2-year cycle. It would have to be submitted and put in the next 2-year cycle. So it will be just under 4 years because of where we're at before you would even know if a new project is gonna score well enough for funding. And so once it scores, then where is it falling in that process? And so again, we've been working on this to give you some perspective. We've been reworking on this since 2023, and we're getting ready to go to right away. So factor in another, if it was funded from the get-go, a good project funded, factor in another few years, you know, so now you're getting into a lot of fingers here.
And you've also got the funding of the
And to
existing
kind of-
projects ahead of it.
Yeah, just to point out that it
To
would
kinda
have
add-
to recompete, you know. So if it was to come out and be submitted, it would have to recompete against the projects that are in there, right? So there's growing needs throughout our community, throughout the state, right? So there would be no guarantee that if it got resubmitted 4 years from now or 2 years from now, that it would be selected as a funded project, because it's going to be up to compete again against other needs in the area.
Allison,
To
hang
kind of
on.
add, Cadmus, to
Hang
what
on, one
you're
thing
saying,
that I-
yeah,
One thing that I
is
did.
in this,
Oh, wait a minute. Go ahead, Allison.
sorry. Yep, so in the STIP program, part of, and Sam can speak about this, you know, thoroughly, but in this particular program, I would say, to answer your question, it depends on what you're submitting and what program you were submitting it through. And if it were to be submitted through the same channels that this project was submitted through, you would need local input points, but you would also need division, NCDOT division input points in order to score high enough to be prioritized to receive funding. And the division is not going to put input points on a project that does not meet our standards or safety concerns that we have.
But to answer your question, it would be many, many years if it was even a viable project. And the flip side, or in addition to that, one of the things that we have to be mindful is we've seen our construction costs go up 60% since, I think, COVID. And so the cost of everything we do is increasing. So all the projects that are already like this in the hopper or that we're working on, we know they're going to go up. I mean, we know that this project in 6 months will cost more, in a year it'll cost more. So anything that's already in progress, we're going to cover those additional costs. So we don't get any extra dollars in the STIP program. And so knowing that the costs are going up, we're seeing less and less projects funded.
And to add one more thing to that, with prioritization, like Mary Beth said, it happens every 2 years. The most recent cycle that we went through was called Prioritization 7. It was the 7th edition of it since the passing of the STI law. With the last cycle, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but I believe across the state there was about $143 billion worth of transportation projects submitted by MPOs and RPOs, like Mid-East RPO, who I represent. The total amount of funding that was available for projects in Prioritization 7 was only about $31 billion, and that's over a 10-year cycle. So it becomes very difficult to get projects funded because you're having to compete against Charlotte, Raleigh, other larger areas, but also for a project like 15th Street that lies on the SR route, those projects can only compete in the lowest tier category, which is called division needs. So we would still have to compete against Greenville, New Bern, Carteret County, and so it becomes increasingly difficult, especially as costs increase over time. And I know that's been hinted at. When the project was submitted in Prioritization 3, which I was in 8th grade at P.S. Jones Middle School when that happened, the project was only $16.2 million. Obviously, we're a lot further down the road now, and it's a lot more. And by the time this project is completed, it'll be a lot more. And so if it's submitted again, you know, if funding were to come about, it would probably be 10 to 20 years at least.
And if I can add one quick thing, and again, I don't want to, we are not trying to be gloom and doom at all, but this year, because of the limited funding, they actually reduced statewide. Every planning organization they're allotted a certain number of slots to submit projects. This year, across the board, was it 30%, Liz? they agreed statewide, they were cutting the number of projects that could be submitted by 30%. It was only a one-year agreement, but it was because of just there wasn't a lot of funds there.
I've heard a lot about 2023, but there was also something in 2016. So roughly, how long has this project even been in conversation?
It was submitted in P3, so what year was that?
Prioritization 3 ran from about 2013 to 2014, but the actual identification of the safety issues on 15th Street originated between 1997 and 2000.
So this has been a long, ongoing conversation about safety, and we've still been losing lives since that conversation has been going on, trying to get to a point that we can move this forward. So it sounds like North Carolina DOT is prepared to move this forward, and, you know, as this is a courtesy from you to come to us and kind of inform, especially with my new colleagues here, to inform them of what you informed the previous council of quite some time ago. Again, I just want to say thank you for also informing the community, and not just the city of Washington like was stated. You know, this is for the community as a whole, because I think there was something going around with signatures that included not just the city but also county as well too, folks who maybe didn't fully understand everything that was being presented to them. So thank you again for always coming to the table, because we've done this throughout the time that I've been sitting here having the conversations, but I think coming here to council chambers, giving the public another opportunity to hear you and actually see more of things kind of laid out here. Because again, a lot of the stoplights weren't really in place at the time. We're still trying to figure out what to do with this light compared to that light, the crosswalks. At one point it was, are we just gonna do one sidewalk on one side of the road and make that one thing, or the other? So this has been a long planning process. So I think if this would go back into the chutes, I'm close to retirement, but I don't want to, and I'm smiling at it, but it's really a serious thing. I don't want to watch Chief, like he had to do yesterday, go and save another life when we could have mitigated that with a simple support of something that can help the community as a whole.
For the pedestrian crosswalks, will those implement the Hawk system, or would that be if the city wanted to do that, that'd be an additional cost?
So for our mid-block crossings, we have the rapid flashing beacons, that's a mouthful, at those locations throughout the corridor. That is the treatment that we're proposing. The only Hawk we have in our division is, as you know, located on 10th Street in Greenville. But so that'll meet the pedestrian needs along the corridor.
I have one final question, and I think you guys have given us a lot of your morning. So to Councilman Tyree's point, this project has been in some level of discussion for 26, 27 years at this point. I think the intersection at Market Street and 15th Street is the one that has the vast, I won't say the majority, has the largest number of accidents that could potentially be mitigated by a left-hand turn signal. Now, it was my understanding that we wouldn't really do that because this project has been hanging around, so they wouldn't do that because it would cost some additional amounts of money. If this project doesn't really get started or kicked off for a few more years, that intersection is likely to continue doing what it does. Is there any potential that we could get something small like that? Or is that, somebody had told me the city could do it at its own cost. I don't know how much it costs to put in a left-hand turn signal, but that just seems like a potentially safety issue that low-hanging fruit.
So I'll start off and then pass over to Mary Beth if she wants it. But, you know, we do have safety-type projects that are small in nature, but we're competing against funding. It's a different funding source, and we're competing with it. And it's got to score high enough to be similar to this to be able to get funded. And a lot of times what drives a project like that out would be, in order to build that left turn lane, you're gonna have to acquire right of way. You're gonna have to move utilities, right? Just as we are under this project. So, right, but you're not gaining anything because you don't have the left turn lane, right? So you still have 2 through lanes in each direction with no dedicated left turn lane. So to improve the safety is where we need to have the dedicated left-hand turn.
I agree and I'm for it, but people with no left-hand turn signal racing through that traffic, that's where a lot of accidents are. Left-hand turn signal, I have no idea what that costs. I'm speculating it's insignificant. We have a left-hand turn signal on one half of that intersection, but not on the other. And again, what I'm saying, without that singular signal, if this project were to take 3 more years to really kick off, that's a lot of potential accidents for a signal. This isn't the one we're looking at.
This is market. Is that what it is?
Yeah, that's right.
Markings
Yeah.
on top.
Yeah,
And
that's
it's new right here. And again, that's not even something that I'm necessarily asking you guys to do. I don't know how much it costs to put a turn signal there, but I'd be happy to do it, but I'm told that's your road, so.
We can absolutely go back and investigate and look at what's going on there. And if it's something as simple, and it would qualify for something as simple as a light, change in the light, we can look at that. Yeah, we'll be glad to look at that.
You're talking about doing that during the period leading up to the project happening, right?
So yes, I can go back and get you an answer on that, because I know some of these signals are timed that we can't add a left to them, but we can check on that. But just to speak a moment to a isolated safety, like if this intersection here was, had a high crash data, there is some safety funding. It's highly competitive and very limited. And so, making an easy modification, like going out and making an easy timing modification or some very small improvements, we do get safety funds for it. They do compete. They are, they look at the benefit to cost ratio. But I will say a lot of the areas get priced out very quickly if you have to get right away, move utilities and things like that. And now what we're seeing, especially on those, if you have to move utilities or get any right of way, we're starting to see those are not immediate. It takes a while to get them vetted, approved for funding, and then actually be able to be out there and go to work. But at that location, we can go back and get you an answer.
And we've talked with our traffic safety group about some interim fixes, just like kind of what you're alluding to, and and we can continue to have those conversations with them to see if something can be done. But the messaging typically from our traffic safety group is, in order to have a dedicated left turn phase, you need a dedicated left turn lane. It becomes difficult to just turn a through lane into dedicated left, and then you have people saying, shoot, I'm in the wrong lane, and they're jetting out, and then we see increased lane departure crashes. And so it's kind of a threading the needle of what is it better to stick with what we have until we can have that increased right of way as a part of this project, or do we just switch up the signal, and then that can increase confusion, and now maybe less left turn crashes, but then you increase the risk of lane departure.
I've got a couple one last thing. If continued, what type of coordination between the DOT's contractor, and the city? I know there was, in a neighboring city, there was a lot of problems on Dickinson that really hurt a lot of businesses, and so we want to, if this goes forward, I would like to hopefully figure out a way we can avoid that. And then I guess the last thing is, alluding to that, how do we make sure this is a 3-year project and not a 10-year project where we can have good coordination with the DOT, the contractor. I know some of these contractors struggle at times, and you have to go find the next one, which I guess is what happened on Dickinson. But so how can we, at the city level, help with that coordination to avoid issues like that? So this is, if it goes through, that it's a seamless process.
So I will say that one thing on Dickinson, and you saw bad press, we worked really closely. I mean, we were communicating with city employees and during that whole process, and at Christmas, we dropped the ball on one messaging, and that's what you know now. And so on some other projects, what we're seeing is when we're in urban areas, communication is primary. And so now in that city, we actually have another project coming, and we're working with their public information officer. We're setting up links and a lot of the, what do you call it, fencing things, and things like that. But we are getting much more involved with putting the message out and working with the municipalities and everything, because we want people to know what's going on in real time, so that if we have an area that we're working in and they can take an alternate route, they can. We've got another project down in Carteret County that we're being very proactive. I mean, we went and we've walked to each business and said, this is what's going on, because we just want to avoid, for us and for the city and everybody, that negative publicity.
I was involved in a project on 5th Street downtown in Greenville, and it was the contractor was wonderful. It was like the best, probably one of the best contractors in the world. So, and he was ahead of schedule, but there was great coordination between the contractor, the property owners, and the city. So, and it seemed like, I saw it happen on Dickinson, and there were some problems downtown as well. But I just want to, if this does move forward, I want to make sure that we have all our T's crossed and I's dotted, that we don't have those issues.
And
Right.
we could meet to discuss kind of what that looks like for Washington with the engagement and updates. Like I said, city, we've got some upcoming work, Allen Road's what Mary Beth was speaking to, and have those conversations of what that looks like for Washington's needs.
And I have a strong background in maintenance, and what I know, especially when you get in urban areas, we've identified everything that we can, but we would go out to do a maintenance project and there would be 2 utility lines. When we went to dig, there was 5, and they're all active. So we know we're gonna find things and we're gonna have delays, but being able to communicate that and work through that, I think, we want to be a partner. We want the city to be a partner with us.
Is there any plan, I know 17 could be considered a bypass, but is there any future plan for any other bypasses to be built around Washington?
So it's a great question. We've, over the years, in the 2014 Beaufort County Comprehensive Transportation Plan, there was an identified US 264 bypass of Washington to the north. It's gone through different iterations. It's gone through different routes. I believe it's 2022 or 2023. We worked closely with a consultant through the NCDOT Feasibility Studies Unit to develop what we call an express design feasibility study. And that gives you a more accurate cost estimate, but also shows you potential right-of-way impacts, constructability issues, floodplain issues, et cetera. When we looked at that, and when we submitted it in our previous prioritization cycle, which was P7, the cost for just the first segment, which runs from Wharton Station Road near Cratches on US 264 to US 17, that alone was about $202 million. The next cycle in P8, our estimate now for that project is probably about $250 million. Million, yes, sir. But, you know, in total, if you add in all 4 segments, that project would probably be over $1.5 billion, and it's just not feasible. And the impacts would be very significant for homeowners in that area.
So it's safe to say no?
I would say I'm eligible to retire in May of 2052.
Okay,
I don't think it's going to happen by then.
okay.
Does council have any other questions at this time? Okay. Mary Beth, you mentioned when thinking about the availability of safety funding that there might be some sort of cap if a project can get priced out. Do you have a rough estimate of what that cap would be when looking about localized safety improvements and that kind of funding?
So it really depends on what the project is. I know some are capped at, if it's something small, well, is it
We-
4?
Yeah, there's different types of funding. So I know that one of them is $400,000, one of them is $750,000.
And is that through spot safety funding? Is that through the line item in the STIP where safety funding already exists? What are those buckets?
It is those safety funds. It's the spot safety and safety funds. And again, you know, they would have to be, a project would be, they would look at the benefit and the cost.
Mhm.
And so there's that benefit cost ratio where it is possibly funded.
Okay. And then from that standpoint, say a localized intersection improvement is identified for safety. Obviously, that crash data is there to support the need for it. If the city was eligible and received $750,000, but maybe the project's going to be $1.5 million, does the city have the opportunity if they wanted to meet that gap?
I would say yes. I don't know that we've done that recently per se, but even on our STIP projects we've had in the past where maybe businesses or others have contributed to those. I don't know what the process is for that, to be honest. But I do know that in the past, the department has allowed financial contributions to certain projects. And I know I referenced, just going back earlier, to 400 and 750. And like I said, just wanted to be clear, it depends on that funding source. I think there's a couple others as well, so just wanted to clarify that.
Understood. Thank you. I have a question. Allison, going back to your presentation that you provided, thank you. That was very informative. I appreciate you taking the time to put that together for us. When you talked about the roadway design manual that you referenced that gives the stipulation around the median, what was the road classification that you were pulling for that definition?
Yeah, of course, no problem. So it was for arterials or collectors.
Thank you. And then in your slide presentation, you also mentioned the vehicles per day, your base year versus future year. And so I've looked at the ArcGIS and the NCDOT data for this corridor. There's 4 data points that exist along 15th Street back to 2002, 2003. However, the 2023 numbers that you presented as vehicles per day are higher than what is presented on that. Do you guys have different traffic count data that was collected in 2023 separate from what's publicly available?
So there are multiple inputs into that base year. And so, yes, we did do our own on-site traffic counts. I can get you the date for that. The company's called Quality Counts. They go out there and they actively count traffic through cameras. And then we also take into account historical trends, and then we do kind of a field review. So I'm not exactly sure what the inputs were on that GIS map, but it's a multifaceted evaluation for that base year.
Okay, thank you. There was a really well-written editorial that talked about the data of 15th Street in the Daily News over the weekend, and going back and looking at those publicly available numbers, and I appreciate understanding that there might be some nuances in how those are inputted. But the ADT in 2002 to 2003 was 17,750 vehicles per day. And our 2000 Washington Thoroughfare Plan was anticipating 35,500 vehicles per day by 2030. But our current average capacity along those 4, or current traffic along those 4 data points averages 17,500 ADT, showing virtually no change in traffic in more than 20 years, nearly 30 years along the corridor. So I guess what I'm having a hard time understanding is how future projections account for growth when historical data doesn't present it. What is the current capacity of the road, and what is the capacity of the road we're designing for understanding the overdevelopment here?
At the end of the day, our proposal is a 4-lane median divided facility for 5860. We're not adding through lanes here, and 12% growth over 27 years is pretty typical. That's what we have found through our evaluations. If you want to send me the data that you have found, we can kind of try to dive into what the methodologies were there. But I don't think any of this changes our proposal.
Understood. There's a really well-written white paper out of Division 8 when their division and their MPO presented the opportunity for a road widening that then was negotiated into a road diet. Great crash data has come out of that and the reduction in crashes as well. But the point that really stood out to me that resonated and I think applies here for our community and understanding is their sentiment when they looked at their 20 years of historical traffic data was, why should we be forced to believe or forced to assume that this traffic is suddenly going to increase when our historical data shows us the numbers otherwise? I will also offer, it was really interesting reading the state demographer's report that was published in December, which continues to show through 2060 a decline in population for Beaufort County. So again, I'm really personally, when I'm trying to wrap my mind around capacity, because we're not solving a capacity problem, we're trying to solve a safety problem. So currently the road is carrying, even by your numbers, 21,000 vehicles per day. What is the current capacity of that road? And then with a 4-lane divided road, if that capacity isn't changing, I guess my then follow-up question is a widening the only way to solve for safety from a transportation planning standpoint?
So I just want to your point, we're not adding through lanes. We're providing dedicated left turn lanes to improve the safety. The purpose and need of this project is not just safety, it is traffic. We all recognize, the safety component with this project. And so we do a traffic forecast for our projects to look ahead in the future. And so we have taken all this information, all these data points, and all the information that we have access to make a founded decision for this corridor, as well as what was submitted into the STEP for scoring. So that is what's led us to where we are here today.
And I know we had talked about it a little bit because Cadmus, you offered that clarification at our January meeting that a lot of the nuance of the median is based on how the project is funded, because we did talk about the retrofit versus the widening. And so could you articulate that for how that median becomes non-negotiable versus as a retrofit that could look differently?
Yeah, I can. And, just for reference, what we were talking about, I think you had brought up about, in front of Beaufort Community College. And it was a different funding source. We did that as a safety project, as similar to what Mary Beth was describing earlier of we had a need out there, so we were able to get that project funded. The difference between what we have in front of Beaufort Community College and what we have on 15th Street is Beaufort 264 at that location was already a 5-lane section, right? So it already had a center turn lane available. So we were able to go in with minimal right-of-way impacts and be able to build a median along that section because we already had the turn lane from the existing conditions. The problem we have here is it's a 4-lane section, undivided, so we don't have those dedicated left turn lanes or a center turn lane. If this was a 5-lane section, then we would have that opportunity probably to go in and put a narrow median in and still have the result of having a left turn lane. But being that it's a 4-lane section right now, you can't retrofit it and develop a left turn lane without widening out the roadway.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. You brought up the community college conversation, and I know that we had a retired bike transportation planner who spoke at that and had some concerns and questions because we're not meeting the bike safety standards with the implementation of a multi-use path. Has it been identified the number of driveways that enter into the multi-use path if this project moves forward?
They're shown on the map. I mean, I don't have a number for you, but I would say that it's the same number of driveways that if a bicyclist was in the turn lane or in the through lane, traveling on the outside lane, using the travel lane, it would be the same number of driveways that he would encounter, right? So, I mean, it's just moving him outside of the travel lane onto the multi-use path. But those crossings, those driveways will tie into the roadway, so it would be the same number of potential conflict points either way.
Yes, no, I understand that. It's just from bike safety studies and transportation planning for bikes, the standard is not to put them on a multi-use path, it's to put them in the roadway as they do operate as a vehicle. And people are not trained to look into the multi-use path for a bike versus looking out onto the roadway for an oncoming car or a bike.
I would say that there's also information that shows that people who, let's say you bike every single day and you've been biking for 20 plus years, folks like that tend to support more of your bike lanes on your roadway versus your families or your less frequent users. Your homeowners tend to support more of your multi-use paths from that separation.
Right, but we're talking about safety, right? And so safety along this corridor is multimodal. It's all users. It's not just our vehicle users. It's so.
Agreed.
Right.
Safety is
And so
comprehensive.
when safety studies have shown us that using the multi-use path for bike traffic is going to actually increase the risk of a pedestrian accident, then I think we need to be looking, and I think we had talked about at the January meeting of looking at what does that look like if it's a bike lane as opposed to a multi-use path, and ensuring that we're meeting those best practices. And so I think there are a lot of nuances of this project. I would also want a clear understanding. I think it's important for when you think about the easement. We've talked about in January's meeting, we're at 16 total relocations. Now we're at 17 total relocations. And we had talked in January that in order for something to constitute as a total relocation, it requires the easement to physically touch the structure. How far from the front door of somebody's home to the sidewalk is that distance if they're not a total relocation qualified? Is that 3
So
feet? Is it 5
relocation is
feet?
defined as a structural impact. There are different design strategies that can be taken into account if needed to reduce that structure impact, such as landscaping walls. It's very nuanced depending on each specific parcel. Speaking to the one additional anticipated relocation, there's been extensive coordination with that property owner. They are aware it was going to take extensive utility guy wire placement and rerouting in order to not acquire them, and they had also expressed their interest in being acquired, and so that is what drove us from 16 to 17.
Understood, but so if my property doesn't qualify for total relocation, what is the distance from my home to a sidewalk, my home to a multi-use path, my home to a 4-lane divided highway? Is that 5 feet of right-of-way? Is that 6 feet of right-of-way? Is it 20 feet of right-of-way? I know that might be property specific, but you do have a lot of homes along this corridor that are concerned about having a 4-lane divided highway in their front yard.
I would just add to that.
Sure.
Let me start this, Allison, but to your point, every parcel is looked at as a parcel. It's not looked at as a conglomerate of every location. It's, site-specific to the level of impacts. I know to your point about structures of the easement or right-of-way line hitting that structure, but they look at the parcel and the amount of impacts to see what type of compensation, whether that's a relocation and things of that nature. I don't know that's predicated on a certain distance. So it's about the amount of impacts. And we could always follow up with more information with our division right-of-way agent. I did want to go back to one thing real quick. When you were talking about bike lanes, I do want to clarify, when you add bike lane, excuse me, to a facility, those are typically, I believe, 5 feet. So 5 feet would be, and we have 11-foot lanes would be added. to the roadway unless you're discussing a share roads or a shared path, and there's different requirements. I just don't have those readily available of what that width would be for those lanes.
Thank you. Sam, maybe this is a question for you. I know the RPO had submitted a request to upgrade the classification of 15th Street. Could you explain why that request was made?
Yeah, and I can explain functional classification. It's something that we do after every decennial census. Happens every 10 years. The last time we did it was 2015. So functional classification is the grouping of roadways by the function that they are intended to serve. There are 7 different classes. First is interstates. Those are designated only by the Secretary of Transportation. There are freeways, which means it would have to be a full control of access highway, 70 miles an hour, like 264 between Greenville and Raleigh. Third is other principal arterial. Fourth is minor arterial. Fifth is major collector. Sixth is minor collector, and 7th is local. 7, with a local road, that means it is a municipal-owned road. It is not maintained by the state. So when we were looking at it this cycle, we looked at a total of 61 total roadway segments throughout our RPO. We have a total of 2,143 centerline highway miles within our RPO. But out of those 61, those were the ones that we found that could potentially have a revision. The reason that we make a revision to a roadway is trying to look at its anticipated future use while also looking at its existing use, but grouping it based on the criteria that is set by the Federal Highway Administration. So in looking at that, our main reason for trying to transition 15th Street from around Sheets, Clark's Neck Road to Eastern Elementary School, which it's going to be that until this summer, when we were looking at that, we were grouping it in other principal arterial based solely off of its annual average daily traffic, which is roughly, I think the average for all of it is between 19 and 21,000 vehicles a day throughout that section. Per Federal Highway Administration guidance, since it is an urban area that the route is going through, that would qualify as being an other principal arterial. Now, on the flip side, there are limits to how many other principal arterials you can have within a municipality, and even throughout a corridor. Washington already has one, which is US 264 5th Street. So when the Functional Classification Review Committee looked at this, they said, okay, we understand that there is a higher AADT count on 15th Street. We don't disagree with the project at all. And I had personal conversations with a member of that committee who also serves as the RPO president. And she said, the project is great. The committee is perfectly fine with that. And the state supports it. We just, based off these technical restrictions, we cannot have 2 principal arterials running adjacent to each other through town. Did that answer?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I know not everyone necessarily had that understanding, so thank you for that. I appreciate it. And I think that it is interesting to think about the fact that 264 is meant to be our primary arterial. That is our principal arterial through Washington. And so I was attending a conference last week, the North Carolina Main Street Conference. It's the largest one we have in the entire country, actually, which is pretty impressive. Department of Commerce did a great job. And they invited 2 national keynote speakers, completely separate people, completely separate organizations, no prior coordination. And in both presentations, those keynote speakers from national organizations came in to talk about how stroads, when you try to turn a street into a highway or into a road, and how we should be trying to kill them at every level of planning because they are not productive when you think about economic development for your community and your price per acre, and how they're the futon of urban transportation because they're neither comfortable as a couch nor comfortable as a bed. So when I offer my frustrations and the data that I've looked at, and I'm saying this more for the community residents, it is not because Ellen's opinion. It is because I have spent the last year with coalition members and other members of our community talking with engineers across our state, MPO directors across our state, but also Federal Highway Administration engineers and representatives and engineers across our country, NGOs, strong towns, trying to make sure that what Washington receives with safety planning is the best option available with the minimal impacts on a negative side. And we've heard a lot of things from the NCDOT side about why this is so great, but with every pro, there is a con, there's a cost. And every way that you look at this project, from my perspective and the information that's presented, the cost is too high. Safety planning and safety corrections can be made at localized intersections. No one's denying that that needs to take place. But the overdevelopment and the right-of-way acquisition and 4 years of construction, we hope, as everyone has sat here and said, it'll probably go longer. Dickinson Avenue took 12 businesses from Greenville, 12. What do we stand to lose? The branch manager for Food Lion has basically been like, yeah, half my staff will be gone, I'll be lucky to survive. There might not be a Food Lion in 4 years of construction. What is the cost? What is the gain and what is the cost? And I'll leave it at that. So thank you.
When that Stantec plan was submitted, did they add driveways or take some away? Were the driveways changed with the previous plan?
Allison, what do you recall on that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that question. I heard Stantec plan and then,
I'm sorry, yes, when that Stantec plan was submitted, did the driveway count reduce?
I would have to dive back into that. I'm not
Okay.
100% sure, but what I do know is it in the Stantec plan, it says because the 15th Street is lacking medians, left and right turns are not controlled, which can lead to sight distance problems and higher rates of angled crashes, which is kind of what we're saying here. Yeah, every proposal comes with their pros and their cons. I think we all agree that, safety is paramount along this corridor. And I think what we're saying here is we are looking to maintain the travel lanes that y'all currently have. And in order to implement safety improvements, additional right-of-way will be needed. And I think that's kind of the gist of it.
My guess is no, we did not reduce the number of driveways. What we're reducing is by putting the island in as the conflict points. The last time I drove on this route, there was a car coming out from one of the businesses, and they wanted to go left, and they were sitting across both travel lanes, and I was sitting 3 or 4 cars back from the light. And so had a fire truck or an ambulance or anybody came down, nobody could get down that entire side of the street because the car was sitting there waiting for the light to turn green in my direction so that people would move so they could come through there.
Right. So as a biker, and I'm not sure if this is a legal question, like a law question or whatever, but am I forced to ride on the bike lane if I'm like a professional bicyclist? Like I can use the roadway to move from point A to point B, can I? So this plan isn't forcing a professional bicyclist to use the bike path, right? So that would be more so for, like I think I was speaking earlier, we have a school being built at the end of the road, so if a family wanted to have their kid ride, but not ride in the street, because they're not a professional bicyclist, they would be able to use the bike path, but it's still functional for everyone to be able to join the community together in a safe way. So we didn't reduce or add driveways. You just have different level of people who would be riding a bicycle.
And I would add to that, we would not.
So to speak to,
I was just going to say, Allison,
Sorry,
we would not restrict cyclists on the roadway. I will say with a new design, we would recommend a wider lane to add that safety. But we wouldn't restrict someone from cycling on the existing roadway or future roadway with those 11-foot lanes.
Well, in the original plan you submitted, didn't we have a specific bike lane on one side of the road, and then we had another like walking path on the other side of the roadway? But then I believe right around the time that there was some pushback to that is when we started reducing those things. So we can't do it all.
You are correct. There was a conversation to add bike lanes as well, but the concern went back to the additional footprint and impacts, and there still is a strong need to reduce those impacts as much as possible, to your point.
So just for new council members, the original plan had specific bike lanes, bike-only lanes. And then on the other, well, the conversation was
There
if
was
we
a
added bike
conversa-
lanes
yeah.
on the other side, and then we could do the other, right? Was that part of that?
I remember that there was conversations about having or not having bike lanes, and the concern was the footprint with that in the multi-use path and the sidewalk. So again, it was primarily focused on, we need these pedestrian facilities, but what can we do to maximize the facilities and minimize the footprint?
And to add to that, just to kind of remind everyone of the slide that showed our utility layout, we are putting utilities underneath the sidewalk and underneath the multi-use path. And if say, we were to not provide a multi-use path, we would still need easement area for those utilities. It just would be a grassy graded area for easement for the utility. We're adding a multi-use path on top. And so we are trying to stack a lot of improvements on top of one another. And then the other advantage that we had kind of pointed out is putting those utilities underneath that multi-use path or sidewalk will allow us to access them in the event of an emergency or what have you without closing down the roadway. So as of right now, your utilities are in your roadway.
Does anybody have any more questions? No? Okay, thank you so much.
So I just want to say thank you for letting us come and talk to y'all. We'll give you our contact information. All this is available. We have a website where a lot of this information is stored. We do not mind coming and talking and answering any questions at any time. We do get that, we are often seen as the big bad DOT, but I can tell you, we can't accommodate everything, and there are pros and cons, but we do our best to be, to talk with people and let them know, just talk to them about any issues. So thank you.
Oh, no, thank you. We really appreciate you guys taking the time to put this together. I think it's been very informative for not only our members of our council, but community. And I would offer, between the community college and things like this, I would make it a recommendation for best practice for how you guys go about communicating with your communities, because I think they've been very beneficial. I think there were a lot of questions, a lot of information that felt like it was getting pushed behind closed doors. And these types of meetings, the community college, it creates opportunity for residents to feel heard. And I think that that's really important with the projects of this scope. So thank you. And thank you, Sam. I appreciate you being here on behalf of the RPO. Thank you, Allison, and wishing best wishes. Healthy baby, healthy mama.
Thanks, you guys. Yeah, any day now. So thank you for bearing with me virtually. I'm happy to be included. And again, if y'all have any questions, you'll have my contact information, and Kathy, who's at the table, who will be stepping in when I'm on maternity leave. And of course, everyone at this table from DOT is a resource to you. So feel free to email them and call them with any questions.
Thank you. Motion to. Do you have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We're adjourned.